Chandra Shekhar Azad, The Eternal Flame of Freedom. Part I, A Child of Fire. On the scorching plains of July 23, 1906, in the small and unassuming village of Bhavra, nestled within the princely state of Alirajpur, a child was born who would one day stand as a living challenge to an empire. He was christened Chandra Shekhar Tiwari, son of Sitaram Tiwari and Jagrani Devi, a boy from a modest Brahmin family whose ancestors hailed from Badarka in Unnao, Uttar Pradesh. There was nothing in the landscape of his birth, no palaces, no armies, no grand wealth that hinted at greatness. And yet, the infant carried within him the pulse of destiny, a force that would ripple far beyond the boundaries of his small village. His mother, Jagrani Devi, bore the weight of many tragedies. She was the third wife of Sitaram, his earlier wives claimed by death's cruel hand. This son, she resolved, would not be ordinary. Into his small shoulders she poured her hope, her prayers, and her unyielding ambition. She dreamed that her boy would grow into a great Sanskrit scholar, a man of scriptures, revered not for violence but for wisdom. It was she who persuaded his father to send him away to Benares, to the sacred city where knowledge was worshipped as fervently as the gods themselves. Thus, the boy's life began with the promise of books and chants, not guns and slogans. But fate, as it so often does, had woven a different fabric for him. As a child, Chandra Shekhar was restless, curious, and daring. He played like other children, but even in his games there was something fierce, something untamed. Villagers recalled that he would climb trees with reckless ease, leap across streams, and never accept defeat in even the smallest contests. His laughter rang like a challenge to the skies. His eyes burned with a spark that seemed too bright for his tender years. There was in him already a refusal to bend, an instinctive defiance of limits. By the time he was a teenager, India herself was restless. The nation was stirring under the non-cooperation movement, a tidal wave summoned by Mahatma Gandhi to shake the British Empire not with swords, but with truth and non-violence. Temples, schools, bazaars, and households echoed with slogans of Swaraj, self-rule. It was 1921. Chandra Shekhar, a mere boy of 15, studying at Kashi Vidyapith in Benares, felt the currents of revolution seize his heart. He was young, but the fire in him was not content with chanting verses. He wanted to act. To him, freedom was not an idea for speeches. It was a living hunger in his veins. So, abandoning the safety of his books, he plunged headfirst into the surging tide of protest. That single decision reshaped his destiny. On December 24, 1921, British authorities arrested him. When the thin, wiry boy was dragged before the Court of Justice MP Karaghat, few expected the defiance that would follow. The magistrate, a stern man of law, asked the boy his name. The boy's lips curled, not in fear, but in a smile of iron. "My name," he said, steady and fearless, "is Azad the Free." The courtroom stirred. The magistrate frowned, thinking perhaps the boy had misunderstood. "Your father's name?" he demanded. The boy's eyes blazed. "Swatantrata Independence." "And your residence?" The boy lifted his chin, unbroken. "Jail." Silence fell. The magistrate's face flushed with anger. Here was no frightened child. Here was a challenge, bold and unyielding. His gavel of authority was mocked, his empire ridiculed by a mere boy. Furious, he sentenced the child to 15 lashes of the whip. The punishment was carried out in the presence of officials. Each blow tore into the boy's back, leaving red welts across his flesh. But with each strike, instead of cries of pain, the air rang with his voice. He shouted slogans of freedom, his tone mocking, triumphant, rising above the sting of leather. By the 10th blow, his skin was raw, yet his lips still curved into a smile. By the 15th, his frail body trembled, but his spirit towered like a mountain. The British had sought to humiliate him, but instead they had forged a symbol, a legend. That day, Chandra Shekhar Azad ceased to exist. He was reborn as Azad, forever free, forever unchained. The news of his defiance spread like wildfire among India's youth. Villages and towns whispered the tale of the boy who laughed at the magistrate, who embraced the whip like garlands, who declared himself a prisoner only of freedom. His mother, though her heart ached at his wounds, recognized that her son's path was no longer hers to shape. She had wished for a scholar, but India had claimed him as her soldier. Azad himself carried no regrets. The brief taste of prison, the sting of the whip, the humiliation of chains, none of it weakened him. Instead, it sharpened his resolve. Gandhi's non-violent path stirred millions. But when Gandhi suspended the movement in 1922, Azad was shattered. To him, the fight was not to be paused, not to be bargained, not to be postponed for another season. Freedom could not be begged, it must be seized. The lash marks on his back became his badge of honor. He touched them, not with bitterness, but with pride, as though each scar whispered to him, "You are Azad. You will never bow." And so, at just 15, the course of his life was set. He was no longer merely a boy from Bhavra or Benares. He had become a flame, restless and untamed, destined to burn bright against the might of the British Empire. Wherever he went, he carried that fire within him, and though he had not yet lifted a weapon, his very presence had become a symbol of resistance, a promise that the chains of slavery could never silence the voice of freedom. The boy had been whipped into legend. The name Azad was no longer just his, it belonged to India. Part 2. The Making of a Revolutionary. The year was 1922, and the great tide of the non-cooperation movement had receded, leaving behind both hope and despair. Across the land, young men who had abandoned schools, jobs, and comforts now stood in uncertainty. Among them was Chandra Shekhar Azad, the boy who had declared himself free before a British magistrate and borne the lash with defiance. But unlike others who returned reluctantly to their studies or trades, Azad found himself unable to step back into an ordinary life. His blood, once stirred, could no longer be cooled. For a time, he wrestled with confusion. Gandhi's withdrawal of the movement, after the violence at Chauri Chaura, had broken many hearts. To Azad, the decision felt like a betrayal of the countless youths who had poured their passion into the cause. Could freedom truly be won by patience and prayer alone? Was the oppressor so merciful that he could be persuaded to hand back a nation through appeals of conscience? Azad's young mind burned with these questions, and his heart whispered the answer, no. It was during this restless period that fate led him to the company of men who would become his comrades, his brothers, and his fellow dreamers of a free India. One of the first was Manmath Nath Gupta, a revolutionary whose courage was matched by his clarity of vision. Through Gupta, Azad was introduced to Prasad Bismil, the poet revolutionary whose verses were hymns of rebellion and whose actions struck fear into the empire. Bismil had founded the Hindustan Republican Association, HRA, in 1923, envisioning it as an armed front to challenge British power. Where Gandhi spoke of non-violence, Bismil spoke of sacrifice, of daring, of striking blows that would shake the very foundations of colonial rule. To Azad, disillusioned with the retreat of non-cooperation, this was like water to a parched soul. He found in Bismil not merely a leader, but a kindred spirit, someone who saw freedom not as a distant dream, but as an urgent demand. And so, Chandra Shekhar pledged himself to the cause of the HRA. No longer would he limit himself to protests or slogans. He would take up arms, collect funds, recruit men, and live each day with the knowledge that death could come at any hour. At an age when others dreamed of careers or families, Azad embraced a life of shadows, conspiracies, and sacrifice. The funds for the movement became one of his chief responsibilities. The empire was vast and wealthy, but revolution required its own treasury. With daring precision, Azad and his comrades organized raids not upon the poor or innocent, but upon the government itself. Their targets were treasuries, trains, and officials who represented colonial exploitation. Each act was both practical and symbolic, money for their movement and humiliation for their rulers. The most daring of these was the Kakori Train Robbery of 1925. A group of revolutionaries, including Bismil, Ashfaqullah Khan, Rajendra Nath Lahiri, Roshan Singh, and Azad himself, planned to halt a government train carrying money near the small town of Kakori, close to Lucknow. On that fateful day, as the train screeched to a halt, the revolutionaries swarmed it like tigers on prey. With astonishing swiftness, they seized the treasure, leaving the British humiliated. But triumph was short-lived. The British government retaliated with fury. One by one, the revolutionaries were hunted down. Trials followed, harsh sentences were handed out, and 4 of the bravest, Bismil, Ashfaqullah, Roshan Singh, and Rajendra Lahiri, were sentenced to death. The nation wept as the gallows claimed them, and the revolutionary movement seemed dealt a fatal blow. Yet one man eluded capture. One man refused to surrender. That man was Azad. With his comrades gone, he might have chosen silence, retreat, or despair. Instead, he chose responsibility. He took upon his young shoulders the task of reorganizing the shattered HRA, gathering the scattered fragments of the movement, and breathing life once more into its body. In time, with men like Shiv Verma, Mahabir Singh, and later Bhagat Singh, Azad rebuilt the organization under a new name, the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, HSRA. The change in name was more than cosmetic. It was an evolution of thought. Inspired by readings of Marx, Lenin, and revolutionary literature, Azad and his comrades saw freedom not merely as the removal of the British flag, but as the birth of a new India socialist, egalitarian, and just. It was no longer enough to dream of political independence. They dreamed of a society where exploitation in any form would be banished. Azad, though often remembered for his gun and his daring, was also a teacher. He borrowed books like The ABC of Communism from socialist thinkers such as Satyabhakta and studied them deeply. He was no mere hot-blooded youth chasing violence. He was a man of ideas, determined to forge not only freedom from foreigners, but freedom from inequality. He spoke to his cadres of socialism, of sacrifice, of building a nation worthy of their blood. Even as he hardened himself to the life of an outlaw, Azad carried within him tenderness and humor. To his comrades, he was both leader and elder brother, fierce in discipline yet warm in affection. His laughter could fill a room, his sharp wit could cut tension like a blade, and his courage inspired even the faint-hearted. Yet always, like a shadow, the danger of death followed him. He knew that one day the empire's net would close around him, that bullets or ropes might claim his life, but he never flinched. Instead, he vowed that he would never be captured alive, never allow his enemies the triumph of parading him in chains. He was Azad, and he would remain Azad to his final breath. Thus, the boy of Bhavra had become the commander of a movement. His transformation was complete. From the lash marks of Banaras to the pistols of Kakori, from the betrayal of non-cooperation to the birth of HSRA, Chandra Shekhar Azad had carved himself into the very heart of India's struggle. He was no longer a youth searching for purpose. He was now the arch-rebel, the outlaw poet of freedom, a flame who knew he would one day burn out but who also knew that his light would guide countless others long after. Part 3. Life in Hiding. Jhansi and the Forests. By the mid-1920s, Chandra Shekhar Azad had already become a name whispered in fear by the British and in reverence by Indians. After the Kakori conspiracy, where the colonial treasury was so boldly seized, and the subsequent execution of Ram Prasad Bismil, Ashfaqullah Khan, Rajendra Lahiri, and Roshan Singh, the revolutionary movement seemed fractured, broken. But Azad remained. He had slipped through the tightening noose of the empire, vanishing like smoke. For a while, the government believed his escape temporary, certain he would be captured soon. But the boy who had declared himself Azad was not one to fall so easily. He chose Jhansi, a city already steeped in the memory of Rani Lakshmi Bai, the warrior queen who had defied the British during the revolt of 1857, as his refuge. To Azad, it was more than a hiding place. It was a continuation of history. If Lakshmi Bai had once drawn her sword upon this soil, he too would train here, breathe here, and one day launch strikes that would echo across India. The forests of Orcha. Azad found his sanctuary in the dense forests of Orcha, about 15 kilometers from Jhansi. Here, amidst the rustling leaves and quiet rivers, he built a secret camp. The trees became his fortress, the riverbank his training ground. It was in these forests that he honed his skills as a marksman, his aim so precise that comrades swore he could split a branch or extinguish a flame from incredible distances. To the youth who gathered around him, he was both teacher and living legend. He drilled them with discipline, for Azad believed that revolution was not the work of chaos, but of order. Each bullet fired was not to be wasted in fury, but aimed with purpose. Every movement, every signal, every strike had to be calculated. He turned the wilderness into a classroom where freedom was the only lesson and sacrifice the only examination. The disguise of Pandit Harishankar. Though the forests kept him safe, Azad could not always live like a fugitive. He needed to blend into the ordinary world, to move among the people without suspicion. And so, he adopted the guise of Pandit Harishankar Brahmachari, a wandering ascetic draped in saffron. Under this disguise, he built a small hut near a Hanuman temple on the banks of the Sitar River. To the villagers, he was a simple priest, often seen with children at his side. He taught them Sanskrit verses, told them tales from the epics, and helped them with their lessons. His laughter with the children, his affection for them, built him a reputation as a holy man with a gentle heart. None could have guessed that beneath the saffron robe lay pistols, or that this humble teacher was in truth the most wanted revolutionary in northern India. It was in Jhansi that Azad's charm as a human being shone as brightly as his fierceness as a fighter. He established genuine rapport with the people of Dimarpura village, winning their trust. The locals, unaware of his true identity, respected him deeply. Years later, when his secret was revealed, many would recall with pride that the great Azad had once lived among them. Brotherhood and comrades. Jhansi became more than a refuge. It was a crucible of friendship and loyalty. It was here that Azad came into close contact with men who would become the pillars of his revolutionary circle: Sadashivrao Malkapurkar, Vishwanath Vaishampayan, and Bhagwan Das Mahawa. These men, along with Azad, formed the beating heart of the reorganized Hindustan Socialist Republican Association. Azad also maintained links with prominent Congress leaders in Jhansi, such as Raghunath Vinayak Dulekar and Sitaram Bhaskar Bhagwat. While they did not openly share his violent methods, they admired his courage and often provided him shelter. He stayed at times in the home of Rudra Narayan Singh in Nai Basti and also in Bhagwat's residence in Nagra. These homes became silent sanctuaries where strategies were whispered and hope was nurtured. In these circles, Azad's role was not merely of a commander issuing orders. He was the heartbeat of the movement, an elder brother who shared food, laughter, and hardships. To his comrades, he was both inspiration and comfort. They often said that when Azad entered a room, fear itself seemed to retreat. The skills of survival. In Jhansi, Azad added new talents to his arsenal. He learned to drive a car at the Bundle Khan Motor Garage in Sadar Bazaar, understanding that mobility would one day be crucial in their missions. He trained his body to endure long hours without food, to sleep lightly in unsafe quarters, to move silently through the night like a shadow. Every act of his daily life was preparation for the revolution. But survival was not his only goal. He wanted to build a self-reliant force, one that could strike terror into the British while also commanding the respect of ordinary Indians. For this, he ensured that his comrades were not mere fighters but men of principle. He insisted on discipline, on integrity, and above all, on devotion to the motherland. A life balanced between shadows and light. Yet even as Azad lived like an outlaw, hunted by the empire, he never lost his human warmth. His time in Jhansi showed a side of him that history often overlooks: the teacher, the friend, the man who delighted in the laughter of children. The disguise of Pandit Harishankar was not merely a mask. It was a glimpse into what Azad might have been in another life, a scholar, a teacher, a sage. But destiny had written another role for him, and he wore it without regret. The British believed they were pursuing a criminal, but those who met him in Jhansi knew otherwise. They saw in him a man who had sacrificed youth, comfort, and safety for a dream larger than himself. He was not just a fugitive. He was a living rebellion, carrying forward the unbroken spirit of India's struggle. In the forests of Orkha and the quiet banks of the Satar, Azad lived between two worlds, the shadows of secrecy and the light of faith. Every day he survived was a victory. Every bullet fired in practice was a promise for the future. Here, in Jhansi, the boy of Bhavra was tempered into steel. He was no longer merely Azad by name, he was Azad, in essence, untamed, unyielding, and destined to remain free until the very last breath. Part 4, with Bhagat Singh, Brothers in Revolution. By the late 1920s, the revolutionary flame in India was burning fiercely once more. The echoes of Kakori still lingered, and the gallows that had silenced Ram Prasad Bismil, Ashfaq Wala Khan, Roshan Singh, and Rajendra Lahiri had not extinguished the fire they had fanned it. Into this turbulent era stepped a new generation of rebels, young, daring, and armed with both ideas and pistols. Among them was a name that would one day become immortal, alongside Azad's: Bhagat Singh. The meeting of Chandra Shekhar Azad and Bhagat Singh was not merely the union of two men, it was the convergence of two spirits of rebellion. Azad was already a legend, the old guard, though still young in years, hardened by trials, whips, and the relentless chase of the police. Bhagat Singh, nearly a decade younger, carried the sharp intellect of a scholar and the fierce courage of a fighter. Where Azad embodied the raw fire of resistance, Bhagat Singh embodied the cool steel of ideology. Together, they would forge a partnership that shook the foundations of the British Empire. The rebirth of the movement. After Kakori, The Hindustan Republican Association, HRA, had been scattered. Azad had carried its remnants on his shoulders, but the movement needed not just survival, it needed rebirth. It was Bhagat Singh, along with comrades like Sukhdev, Shivaram Rajguru, and others, who brought to Azad a new vision: socialism. The fight was not only against British rule, but against every form of exploitation, economic, social, and political. Thus, in September 1928, in a clandestine meeting, the revolutionaries reorganized under a new name, the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, HSRA. The addition of socialist was no mere flourish. It was a declaration that the revolution was not for transfer of power alone, but for the creation of a just, equal society. Azad, the commander-in-chief, lent his authority and charisma to the cause, while Bhagat Singh infused it with theory and vision. The HSRA now carried both the gun and the manifesto, both the fire of action and the depth of ideology. Avenging Lala Lajpat Rai. In October 1928, the aged patriot Lala Lajpat Rai led a protest against the Simon Commission in Lahore. The commission, which had arrived to discuss reforms in India without a single Indian representative, was met with fury across the nation. Rai stood at the forefront of the demonstration, fearless even in his age, when the police ordered a brutal lathi charge. Struck heavily on the chest, Rai was mortally wounded. Within weeks, he succumbed to his injuries. His death sent shockwaves through the country. For Bhagat Singh and his comrades, it was not merely a tragedy, it was an outrage demanding vengeance. The target was James A. Scott, the police officer responsible for ordering the assault. A plan was hatched. Azad, Bhagat Singh, Rajguru, and Sukhdev would avenge Lala Lajpat Rai. But fate, with its cruel hand, played a trick. On December 17, 1928, in Lahore, the revolutionaries mistook John P. Saunders, an assistant superintendent of police, for Scott. As Saunders exited the police headquarters, Rajguru and Bhagat Singh fired, and the officer fell. As they fled, an Indian constable named Chanan Singh gave chase. It was Azad who turned back, steady in aim, and shot him dead, ensuring his comrades could escape. The act reverberated across India. To the British, it was murder. To Indians, it was justice, the blood of Saunders for the blood of Lajpat Rai. The HSRA pamphlet, signed under Azad's pseudonym Balraj, explained their act to the nation. This was no crime, but a declaration that the oppressor's violence would not go unanswered. A brotherhood forged in fire. Azad and Bhagat Singh grew close in these years, their bond more than strategy. They were brothers in the truest sense, one the elder flame, the other the younger torchbearer. They spent nights plotting in secret rooms, days practicing marksmanship, and hours in passionate debate about the future of India. Azad respected Bhagat Singh's intellect, his ability to articulate socialism, his gift for words that could stir thousands. Bhagat, in turn, revered Azad's daring, his fearlessness, his refusal to compromise even under constant pursuit. Where Bhagat Singh brought books like Marx's Communist Manifesto into the revolutionaries' hands, Azad ensured that those hands were steady on the trigger of a pistol. To their comrades, they represented the perfect balance: mind and muscle, thought and action, scholar and soldier. Together they kept the HSRA alive, vibrant, and dangerous. The growing storm. The HSRA's activities intensified. From political assassinations to attempts at sabotage, they carried forward their campaign of terror against the empire. In 1929, they even attempted to blow up the Viceroy's train near Delhi, a plot that narrowly failed but revealed the audacity of their vision. By then, The British were determined to crush them once and for all. Rewards were announced for Azad's capture, his posters pasted across towns and cities, branding him a notorious outlaw. But to the youth of India, he was no criminal, he was a hero, a living embodiment of freedom's defiance. The legacy of the alliance. The friendship of Azad and Bhagat Singh was brief, for destiny claimed Bhagat Singh too soon. In 1931, when Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru were sentenced to death for the Lahore conspiracy case, Azad was still alive, still fighting. He could not prevent their execution, though he longed to rescue them. But the bond they had shared, the dream they had crafted together, survived. For Bhagat Singh, Azad had been the elder brother who showed him that ideas must be carried by courage. For Azad, Bhagat Singh had been the comrade who proved that courage must be guided by vision. Together, they had written a chapter of India's freedom struggle that could never be erased. The British had called them criminals. History remembers them as martyrs. But to each other, they were simply brothers, bound by a love for the motherland, bound by a willingness to die so others might live free. And in that brotherhood, India found one of its greatest stories of resistance. Part V, The Final Years. The Shadow of Alfred Park. By the dawn of the 1930s, Chandra Shekhar Azad was a man living with both glory and burden. For more than a decade, he had eluded the British, his name whispered in bazaars and alleyways like that of a phantom. To the empire, he was the most wanted outlaw in India. To his people, he was a hero beyond compare. Yet behind the legend stood a man who knew his days were numbered. The HSRA had grown under his command, carrying out daring acts that had shaken the colonial administration. But with every strike, the British tightened their net. Rewards for Azad's capture, dead or alive, were posted across provinces. Informers multiplied. The empire, humiliated time and again by his escapes, was determined to see him fall. And yet, Azad moved with astonishing freedom. He lived in disguises, sometimes as a farmer, sometimes as a sadhu, sometimes as a schoolteacher. In one place, he was the saffron-clad Pandit Hari Shankar, teaching children scriptures. In another, he was a mechanic learning the art of engines. But beneath every mask, the same fire burned. Every day of his survival was both an act of defiance and a preparation for the inevitable end. A growing weariness. Though outwardly unshaken, those closest to Azad sensed a change in him during these years. He was still fierce, still commanding, but the losses weighed heavily. The gallows had claimed Bhagat Singh, Rajguru, and Sukhdev in March 1931. Their deaths, though immortalizing them as martyrs, had left scars on Azad's soul. He had fought alongside them, dreamed alongside them, and now stood alone, carrying their unfinished revolution. He often confided to comrades that he would never let the British capture him alive. His pledge to remain Azad until his last breath was not bravado, it was the core of his being. "The chains of prison are not for me," he once said. "If my time comes, I will meet it as a free man, not as a captive." The betrayal. In Allahabad, where the revolutionary network had threads, Azad sought refuge in planning space. Among his acquaintances was Veerbhadra Tiwari, a man who had once offered loyalty but whose heart had turned treacherous. It was he who carried word to the police that Azad would be at Alfred Park, today known as Chandra Shekhar Azad Park, on the morning of 27 February 1931, in the company of his trusted aide Sukhdev Raj. The police, long thirsting for this opportunity, moved swiftly. The CID head J.R.H. Bauer led the operation, supported by the Allahabad police and armed constables under DSP Thakur Vishweshwar Singh. They ringed the park, sealing every exit. The trap was set. The last battle. Azad, seated beneath a tree in Alfred Park, was in conversation with Sukhdev Raj when the police advanced. Realizing the betrayal, Azad acted instantly. Pistols drawn, he ordered Raj to escape, to carry forward the fight. "You must live," he told him. "If I fall today, the struggle must not." The shootout began in a storm of bullets. Azad, with the precision of a master marksman, felled 3 policemen. His movements were swift, his fire unerring, his courage towering even in the face of overwhelming odds. The British had come with rifles, but Azad had only his pistol and his will. Yet for every shot fired against him, he sent back a reply. As the battle raged, he darted behind the thick trunk of a tree for cover. The bark splintered with bullets, but he stood firm, firing back whenever the chance came. Eyewitnesses later recalled the awe with which the policemen viewed him, one man, outnumbered and cornered, yet fighting as if an army lived in his veins. But bullets are finite, and fate is merciless. Azad was struck, wounded, blood seeping into the soil of the park. Still, he would not relent. With one hand pressed against his wound, he continued to fire with the other, covering Raj's escape. His voice, hoarse yet commanding, urged his comrade onward until Raj was gone. Alone now, he prepared for the inevitable. When the smoke cleared and the echoes of gunfire hung heavy, Azad realized he had but one bullet left. The British were closing in, certain of their triumph. But Azad remembered his vow, never to be captured alive. With steady hands, he lifted the pistol to his temple. For a moment, perhaps, his life flashed before him: the village of Bhavra, the lashes of Benares, the forests of Orcha, the laughter of comrades, the faces of martyrs. And then he pulled the trigger. The echo of that final shot silenced the battlefield. The British froze. They had come to arrest a fugitive. Instead, they stood before a martyr who had denied them victory. Aftermath. When they approached, hesitant and shaken, they found his body lying by the tree, still defiant in death. DSP Vishweshwar Singh was injured, not Bauer himself wounded. The British carried Azad's body away, fearful of the uproar his death would cause. Without informing the public, they rushed it to Rasulabad Ghat for cremation. But secrecy could not contain the storm. News spread like wildfire. Azad was gone. Azad had kept his word. Azad had died free. Across Allahabad, thousands poured into the streets. They thronged Alfred Park, chanting his name, raising slogans against the British. To them, his blood had sanctified the soil. His sacrifice had renewed the revolution. Jawaharlal Nehru, in his autobiography, recalled meeting Azad only weeks before his death. He wrote that Azad had inquired about the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, about whether he could ever cease being an outlaw. Nehru sensed in him both doubt and resolve, a man aware of the futility of endless violence, yet unwilling to surrender. That tension ended on the cold ground of Alfred Park, where he chose the bullet over chains. The shadow and the light. The tree under which Azad fell still stands, scarred but proud, a living witness to his last battle. For generations since, it has been a place of pilgrimage, where Indians bow not to stone or idol, but to memory itself. Azad's death did not weaken the freedom struggle. It strengthened it. His courage inspired countless others to rise, to fight, to believe that freedom demanded everything, even life. He was only 24 when he fell, yet in those brief years he carved a legacy larger than centuries. In that final act of defiance, Azad proved true to his name. He lived free, he fought free, and he died free. The British could kill the man, but they could not kill the idea he embodied. And so Alfred Park was not the end of Chandra Shekhar Azad. It was his rebirth into eternity. Part 6. Legacy and Memory. The Immortal Azad. When the last echo of Chandra Shekhar Azad's pistol faded in Alfred Park, India did not weep silently, it roared. Though his body had fallen, his name had risen beyond death. News of his martyrdom spread from Allahabad to Delhi, from villages in Uttar Pradesh to towns in Punjab, from Bengal to Maharashtra. Within days, his death had become not merely a story but a legend, etched into the collective memory of a people bound in chains yet dreaming of freedom. The British had hoped to silence a rebel, but they had instead birthed a martyr. They cremated his body in secrecy at Rasulabad Ghat, fearing public unrest. Yet secrecy was powerless against love. The people learned, they gathered, they mourned, they protested. Crowds surrounded Alfred Park, chanting, "Inquilab Zindabad!" and "Chandra Shekhar Azad Amar Rai." His death had not ended the revolution, it had set its spirit ablaze. The symbol of defiance. Azad's very name had been a proclamation of freedom, and in death it became immortal. For millions of Indians, he was not just a man but an idea. The idea that liberty was worth any price. Children whispered his name in classrooms, young men painted it on walls, and women told his story as bedtime tales to their children. He had become a symbol of eternal defiance, the boy who laughed at the whip, the commander who fought like an army, the martyr who refused capture. Jawaharlal Nehru, in his autobiography, confessed the complexity of Azad's final days. Nehru had met him weeks before the Alfred Park encounter, sensing in him both the fatigue of endless struggle and the unwavering refusal to surrender. He saw the futility of his methods, Nehru wrote, yet he could not wholly accept peaceful methods either. That contradiction, Nehru believed, was the essence of Azad, caught between the dream of armed revolution and the larger currents of history, yet steadfast in his belief that he must remain free. To Gandhi, who preached nonviolence, Azad's methods were troubling. Yet even Gandhi acknowledged the courage of the young revolutionary. The Mahatma may not have approved of the pistol, but he could not deny the purity of the spirit behind it. In a way, Azad became a bridge admired by both moderates and extremists, respected even by those who disagreed with his means. Institutions of memory. Over the decades, India carved Azad's name into its geography and institutions. Parks, roads, schools, and colleges were named in his honor. Statues rose across the land, but none more symbolic than the one at Alfred Park itself, where his bronze figure now stands defiant, pistol in hand, as if forever guarding the soil he sanctified with his blood. The park itself was renamed Chandra Shekhar Azad Park, and to this day it remains a place of pilgrimage. People gather beneath the tree where he fought his last battle, laying flowers, whispering prayers, and retelling the tale of the youth who would not kneel. That tree, scarred by bullets, became a living monument, a silent witness to a promise kept. Azad in popular memory. Azad's story found its way into art, cinema, literature, and theater. In 1963, Jagdish Gautam's film Chandra Shekhar Azad brought his tale to the silver screen. Manoj Kumar's 1965 film Shahid, though centered on Bhagat Singh, immortalized Azad as well. In 2002, no less than 3 films depicted him 23rd March 1931, Shahid, The Legend of Bhagat Singh, and Shahid-e-Azam, each with a different actor embodying his fiery spirit. The 2006 film Rang de Basanti, where Amir Khan played Azad, connected his life to modern youth, drawing parallels between the sacrifices of the 1930s and the apathy of a new generation. For many young Indians, this was their first intimate encounter with Azad, a reminder that history's heroes still demanded remembrance. Television, too, carried his flame. The 2018 series Chandra Shekhar chronicled his life from boyhood to martyrdom, introducing him to households across the nation. In 2023, the national broadcaster DD National aired a full episode in Swaraj dedicated to him, with actor Manish Nagdev portraying the young rebel. Through these portrayals, Azad ceased to be merely a figure of textbooks. He became a living presence in the cultural imagination of India. The inspiration for generations, Azad's greatest legacy lies not in statues or films, but in the hearts he continues to inspire. To the student frustrated with injustice, to the worker demanding dignity, to the youth searching for purpose, Azad's story is a call to courage. His defiance reminds them that fear is the ally of tyranny, and that even the smallest voice can roar if it speaks with conviction. In villages, children still memorize the lines once whispered about him. "We will face the enemy's bullets. We were free. We are free. We will remain free." These were not mere words. They were the essence of his being. Beyond time, Chandra Shekhar Azad died at 24, an age when most are still beginning to dream. Yet in those short years, he lived a life larger than kings. He had no throne, no palace, no riches, but he had what emperors lacked: the unbreakable bond of love with his people. In the sweep of history, many warriors have fallen, but few have become eternal. Azad was one such soul. His legacy was not measured in victories won on the battlefield, but in the courage he sowed in the hearts of millions. He showed India that freedom was not an abstract idea. It was a living truth worth dying for. Even today, nearly a century after his final shot rang in Alfred Park, his story does not feel distant. It is retold not as a relic of the past, but as a living challenge. What will you do for freedom? How far will you go for justice? Azad remains a flame, burning, guiding, daring every generation to remember that liberty is never given, only taken, never begged, only claimed. And so, he lives on. In statues and parks, in films and books, but most importantly in the pulse of India itself. Chandra Shekhar Azad was not just a man of his time. He is a man of all time, the immortal Azad. Part 7. The Ideals of Azad. Philosophy and Vision. Behind the pistol, the defiance, and the legendary name of Azad, there was a thinker, a man whose ideals were not born of mere rage but of deep conviction. To see him only as a gun-wielding revolutionary is to miss the heart of who he was. For Chandra Shekhar Azad, the revolution was not simply a series of violent strikes against the British. It was the dream of a new India, reborn through sacrifice, justice, and equality. From anger to vision, Azad's early defiance, the boy who declared his name Azad before a British magistrate, was instinctive, a cry of the heart. But as he grew, his rebellion transformed into philosophy. He read widely, listened to comrades, and debated passionately. His close association with revolutionaries like Ram Prasad Bismil gave him the first taste of a structured movement. But it was his later bond with men like Bhagat Singh, Shiv Verma, and Mahabir Singh that deepened his understanding. Through them, he encountered new ideas: socialism, Marxism, egalitarianism, which shifted his dream from mere expulsion of the British to a complete transformation of Indian society. He realized that to simply remove the empire's flag without addressing inequality and exploitation would be an incomplete victory. What good was freedom if the poor remained chained by hunger, the farmer by debt, the worker by oppression? Thus, Azad began to envision a nation not just free of foreign rulers, but free of all forms of tyranny. The socialist turn. It was during his leadership of the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, HSRA, that Azad's philosophical clarity crystallized. The very inclusion of the word socialist in the organization's name was significant. It was not merely about political independence, but about restructuring society itself. His comrades introduced him to works like Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto and the ABC of Communism. Azad absorbed these writings not as dogma but as tools. He understood that ideas alone could not win freedom, but without ideas, revolution was blind. He borrowed texts, studied them, and then taught their lessons to his cadres. By firelight in secret huts, by riverside in Jhansi, he spoke to young men about socialism, about dignity of labor, about a just order that would rise from the ashes of colonialism, balance of thought and action. Yet, Azad was not a dreamer lost in theory. He knew that revolutions demanded blood as much as books. To him, ideals and action were inseparable. A man must first believe, then act. His gun was not wielded out of hatred but out of necessity, an instrument of a larger purpose. He told his comrades, "We are not bandits. We are not criminals. Every rupee we seize, every shot we fire, is for Bharat Mata. Never forget that our struggle is not for ourselves, but for those who cannot fight." This discipline distinguished Azad's band from mere rebels. They were men who dreamed of a nation where justice would not be a privilege of the few but the right of all. Discipline and sacrifice. Azad believed that the path of revolution was not only about striking the enemy, it was about forging oneself. He demanded of his comrades discipline, honesty, and sacrifice. He despised selfishness. If a man joined the HSRA seeking glory or wealth, Azad dismissed him at once. He lived the same austerity he demanded. He owned little, ate sparsely, and never clung to comfort. Money collected through raids was never for personal use, it belonged to the movement. Even when rich sympathizers like Motilal Nehru quietly supported him with funds, Azad spent every coin on weapons, training, and the sustenance of his comrades. Not a paisa lined his own pocket. His life was a testament that ideals were not to be spoken but lived. Relationship with nonviolence. Azad's philosophy was not blind hatred of nonviolence. He respected Gandhi, admired the Mahatma's ability to mobilize millions, and recognized the power of peaceful struggle. But he also saw its limits. "Can we melt chains with prayers?" he asked once. "Can we shame the oppressor into leaving? Perhaps. But until then, we must fight." In this, he embodied the tension of his era, torn between the moral appeal of nonviolence and the harsh reality that empires seldom yield without force. His solution was not to deny one path, but to walk his own. If Gandhi was the saint of freedom, Azad was its warrior, different, yet bound by the same goal. The pledge of freedom above all. Azad's philosophy was rooted in freedom of the spirit. To him, slavery was not only chains upon the body but fear upon the mind. "The true revolutionary," he said, "must live free of fear, free of greed, free of ego." Only then could he call himself Azad. His famous pledge never to be taken alive was not only tactical but philosophical. It was his way of asserting that freedom is not negotiable. Better to die by one's own hand than live as a prisoner. That vow became the compass of his life, guiding every action until his final moment beneath the tree in Alfred Park. Influence on youth. Azad's ideals found fertile ground among India's youth. He spoke their language not only of sacrifice but of dignity, not only of struggle but of hope. To students in Benares, to workers in Allahabad, to farmers in Jhansi, he was proof that one could live unbowed. Even after his death, his philosophy continued to inspire. The idea that freedom required courage, that revolution must be rooted in justice, became the inheritance of generations. His insistence on living by principle, whether in poverty, secrecy, or danger, remains one of the purest examples of integrity in the freedom struggle. A flame beyond death, Chandra Shekhar Azad's vision was not fully realized in his lifetime. He did not live to see India free, nor to build the socialist society he dreamed of. But the ideals he carried, the union of freedom with justice, of action with vision, survived him. When India finally broke her chains in 1947, many remembered Azad's dream and asked whether independence had lived up to it. His philosophy remains a mirror in which every generation must look. Are we free in body alone, or free in soul as well? Azad's life reminds us that freedom is more than a flag. It is a way of being. And until the last man and woman live without fear or exploitation, his ideals remain unfinished business. He died at 24, but his philosophy belongs to eternity. Part 8. The Cultural Memory of Azad. Songs, stories, and cinema death did not end Chandra Shekhar Azad, it multiplied him. The man who fell beneath a tree in Alfred Park on that February morning of 1931 became a story retold across every corner of India. For a nation in bondage, his life was aflame. For generations that followed, his memory became a mirror of courage. Azad was not buried in silence. He was resurrected in songs, stories, and cinema that ensured his name would never fade. Folk songs and oral tradition. Long before his tale was written in books, it was sung in villages. Balladeers carried his name in rustic melodies, blending history with legend. In Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, folk singers sat beneath banyan trees, their dholak and manjira keeping rhythm as they sang, Azad goli ka kagir gai ped ke niche, parazadi ki az jagi har dil ke beech. Azad fell beneath the tree with bullets in his chest, but the hope of freedom awoke in every heart. Children grew up hearing these songs at village fairs. Mothers sang them while putting infants to sleep. Farmers hummed them in the fields, and students whispered them during secret meetings. The songs blurred the line between fact and myth. Azad was not merely a man, but a larger-than-life hero who could dodge bullets like wind and stare down armies with a single glare. These oral traditions made sure that even the illiterate knew his story. In the cadence of folk poetry, his life was woven into the fabric of Indian identity, literature, and remembrance. As the years passed, writers sought to preserve Azad's story with detail and reverence. His comrade Manmath Nath Gupta, himself a participant in the Kakori conspiracy, wrote extensively about him. In his book History of the Indian Revolutionary Movement, Gupta gave personal accounts of Azad's bravery, discipline, and ideals. His pages kept alive not only the facts but the spirit of a man who refused to be forgotten. Other writers, too, both in Hindi and English, turned to Azad as subject. Some painted him as the ultimate rebel, others as a tragic youth doomed to martyrdom. In every portrayal, however, one theme endured. His name was synonymous with freedom. Cinema's Azad. The arrival of cinema gave Azad's story a new canvas. Films carried his legend not just to villages and towns, but to the glowing silver screens where entire generations came to know his face, his voice, and his last stand. The 1963 film Chandra Shekhar Azad was one of the earliest attempts to dramatize his life. It offered audiences a heroic portrayal, blending romance with revolution, showing the young Azad not only as a fighter but as a man of heart. 2 years later, in 1965, Manoj Kumar's Shahid, though centered on Bhagat Singh, etched Azad too into cinematic memory. Played with intensity, he was shown as the elder brother of the revolutionaries, the anchor of the HSRA. As decades passed, Azad appeared again and again on screen. In 2002, a remarkable year for revolutionary cinema, 3 different films gave him life. 23 March 1931, Shahid, with Sunny Deol as Azad, The Legend of Bhagat Singh, with Akhilendra Mishra as Azad, and Shahid-e-Azam, with Raj Zuchi as Azad. Each performance offered a new shade. Diol gave him physical force. Mishra lent him gravitas. And Zucchi portrayed his fierce determination. Then came 2006, when Rakesh Omprakash Mehra's Rang de Basanti reimagined Azad for a new era. Amir Khan's portrayal blurred past and present, drawing parallels between the revolutionary youth of the 1930s and the apathetic youth of modern India. The film did not merely retell history, it demanded that audiences confront whether they had forgotten the sacrifices of men like Azad. It became a cult phenomenon, ensuring Azad's name reached millions who might otherwise have known him only as a name in school books. Television followed suit. The 2018 series Chandra Shekhar dedicated itself entirely to his life, tracing his journey from the small boy in Bhavra to the martyr of Alfred Park. Played successively by child actor Ayan Zubair, teenager Dev Joshi, and adult Karan Sharma, the serial made Azad a daily presence in households across India. And in 2023, the national broadcaster DD National featured him in its historical series Swaraj, with Manish Nagdev donning the role. Through cinema and television, Azad lived again, not as a distant martyr, but as a flesh-and-blood man whose choices, dilemmas, and courage felt immediate. Theater and popular culture beyond cinema, Azad became a staple of stage plays performed by political and student groups. Across universities in India, from Banaras Hindu University to Delhi University, young dramatists portrayed his story, often on makeshift stages, to thunderous applause. The student movements of the 1960s and 70s in particular found inspiration in his tale, staging plays where Azad's pistol became a metaphor for fearless protest. Even in cartoons, murals, and street art, his figure appeared mustached, pistol in hand, eyes blazing. Walls in small towns bore graffiti declaring, "Azad Amar Rahi, long live Azad." His very silhouette had become a cultural symbol of rebellion. The myth and the man. Of course, memory often transforms men into myths. In songs and stories, Azad became superhuman, bulletproof, invincible, larger than life. The truth, more human yet more profound, was that he was a mortal youth who chose courage over fear. The exaggerations did not diminish him. They only reflected the hunger of a people who needed their heroes to be gods. Azad himself would have smiled at this transformation. For though he never sought glory, he knew that legends fuel revolutions. If his story, even embroidered, could inspire a child to rise against injustice, then the myth was as valuable as the man. A living presence today, the cultural memory of Azad is not confined to books or films. It pulses in slogans shouted at protests, in murals painted by activists, in the very vocabulary of dissent. To invoke Azad is to invoke the spirit of fearless resistance. He has become more than a figure of history. He is a presence in India's ongoing struggle with itself. A reminder that freedom is fragile and must be constantly renewed. Songs keep him alive, cinema reimagines him, and every retelling ensures that he remains what he always was: free, fearless, unforgettable. Azad the man died in 1931. Azad the memory has never died. Part 9. The Eternal Relevance of Azad. A Call Across Generations. It has been nearly a century since Chandra Shekhar Azad fired his last bullet beneath the tree in Alfred Park. Empires have fallen, flags have changed, nations have risen, but the name Azad still echoes, still commands reverence, still inspires awe. For Indians today, born in freedom he never lived to see, the question lingers, what does Azad mean to us now? More than a martyr, history remembers Azad as a revolutionary, a gun in hand, a fugitive defying the British. But to see him only through that lens is to miss the depth of his gift. He was not just a martyr, He was a symbol of uncompromising integrity. In an age when compromise was tempting, when fear silenced many, Azad refused to bow. His courage was not only in facing bullets, but in living each day with the certainty that death stalked him, and choosing, still, to live for others rather than himself. In this, his life transcends its time. Every generation faces its own tyrannies, whether of injustice, inequality, corruption, or fear. And in every age, Azad stands as a reminder: liberty demands sacrifice. His name is less about 1931 than it is about the eternal human struggle to be free. The meaning of Azad. Few names in history carry the weight of their bearer as perfectly as his. To call himself Azad, the free, was not a boast, but a vow. It was a declaration that freedom is not merely a political state, but a state of mind. Even when hunted, wounded, and cornered, he remained Azad. Even in death, he chose freedom over captivity. This is why his relevance endures. Nations may change their rulers, but true freedom, freedom from fear, from greed, from oppression, remains a pursuit. Azad teaches that liberty is not gifted by governments. It is claimed by hearts that refuse to surrender. The challenge to the youth Azad's life was brief. He died at just 24, but it was precisely this brevity that sharpened his message. He speaks most loudly to the young, for he himself was youth incarnate, restless, daring, unwilling to accept the world as it was. To students today who feel powerless before vast systems, his life is a challenge. You are never too young to resist. You are never too small to matter. Azad did not wait for maturity, wealth, or security before acting. At 15, he defied a magistrate. By his 20s, he led an army of dreamers. His courage was not about age, but about conviction. That conviction remains the inheritance of every young Indian who whispers his name. Relevance in modern India. Independent India has roads, colleges, and parks named after Azad. Statues of him stand tall, pistols raised in eternal defiance. But his true relevance lies not in stone or plaque. It lies in whether the nation has lived up to his dream. Azad did not fight for a flag alone. He fought for an India where justice and equality would reign. He envisioned a socialist republic where no man would be master of another, where poverty would not enslave the poor, where exploitation would not scar society. Today, when inequality persists, when corruption corrodes, when fear stifles voices, Azad's life becomes a mirror. It asks, are we truly Azad? Or have we only changed masters? The global legacy Azad's story is not India's alone. Around the world, from Africa to Latin America, revolutionaries have drawn courage from men like him. He belongs to the brotherhood of freedom fighters everywhere. Che Guevara in Cuba, Patrice Lumumba in Congo, Nelson Mandela in South Africa. Though separated by continents and causes, they share the same essence, the belief that dignity is worth more than life. Azad's name thus travels beyond borders. His life says to all oppressed people, resistance is never in vain. Even if you fall, your defiance becomes immortal. The tree and the flame. At Alfred Park in Allahabad, the tree beneath which Azad fell still stands. Its bark is scarred, its roots deep, its branches wide. Generations have stood beneath it, imagining the young man crouched there, pistol in hand, blood on his brow, eyes blazing. That tree is more than wood and leaf, it is the embodiment of memory. But perhaps more powerful than the tree is the flame. Azad's flame still burns in every act of courage, when a student raises their voice against injustice, when a worker demands dignity, when a citizen refuses to bow before corruption. His life reminds us that freedom is not a gift preserved in museums. It is a flame each generation must guard, feed, and pass on. Eternal Azad, Azad once said, Dushman ki golion ka hum samna karenj. Azad hi rahe hain. Azad hi rahenj. We will face the enemy's bullets. We were free, we are free. We will remain free. It was not poetry. It was prophecy. His body fell, but his spirit remained Azad. His enemies thought to silence him, but his name became louder than their empire. Even now, school children chant those words, unaware perhaps of the full weight of history, but carrying forward his vow. Chandra Shekhar Azad is not locked in the past. He is alive in every act of defiance, every dream of justice, every refusal to kneel. He is not a memory to be mourned, but a challenge to be lived. A call across generations. As the final chapter of his life reminds us, Azad did not die in despair. He died keeping a promise. He died free. And in doing so, he issued a call not just to his comrades in 1931, but to us, here and now. That call asks, will you live as Azad? Will you guard freedom not only from foreign rulers, but from every form of tyranny? Will you keep alive the fire that one young man carried into the face of an empire? The answers lie not in history books, but in how we choose to live today. If we live with courage, integrity, and resistance to injustice, then Azad breathes through us. If we surrender to fear and greed, then we betray him. Azad was not merely a revolutionary of his time, he is the eternal revolutionary, the eternal flame. His relevance will never fade, because the hunger for freedom is as old as humanity and as new as each dawn. And so, nearly a century later, when the wind stirs the leaves of that old tree in Allahabad, it still carries his voice. We were free. We are free. We will remain free.